All right, hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of our Labs Open Office Hour. I'm Houston, our host, and I have with us. Welcome to you guys are another episode of our Labs Open Office Hour. You guys hear that? I'm Houston, our host, and I have with us Twitch preview making noise because I'm a professional. There we go. All right, and I have with me Matt Bach. He's on my right. He's our senior labs tech, the resident Adobe expert. I suppose is probably the best way to put that. Yeah.
Yeah. I've done a lot of stuff with Adobe apps.
That's cool. So today we're only having just you on, so that we can kind of a little bit more hyper focus on a particular topic, and that's going to be post-production, like hardware-related topics for the day. I know lately quite a bit actually has been kind of happening with Adobe. They just recently did like GPU acceleration for H.264, 265 stuff. And then of course there's been CPU releases and that sort of a deal. Yeah. So I do feel like we have quite a bit to talk about. Even if some questions aren't coming through, there have been quite a bit of changes, and probably more coming in the future.
Yeah, and that's the future stuff is always the harder things for us because we know some stuff that's not public. Although I will say that Adobe's been doing a really cool job recently. They released their public beta program. So for all of the video apps like After Effects, Premiere Pro, Media Encoder, just in the Creative Cloud app, you can go in and download the betas. So most of those apps, I don't know if there's much that we know that the public doesn't know because like it's in the public betas, which is awesome because that means we like don't have to censor ourselves as much and be like, oh, this isn't public knowledge or this is. It's just
that's good. Yeah, that helps.
It's public
beta.
Helps a lot. It's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, that's neat. I wonder. I wonder what motivated that. It is cool though, because like you put out that there was the 14.2 beta with the hardware acceleration stuff, and I suppose that was a public beta. Anybody could have went and got that and done the same stuff that we were doing. So that's nice to know.
Yeah, it's really. I think it's a couple of things. Oh man, we're already getting into things really deeply already.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Make sure. Yeah, if anyone has any direct questions, like ask away questions. But otherwise, I'm just going to keep talking. But yeah, I think there's a couple of reasons why they're making their betas public. One, using a beta program where people are opting into it is always better for like working out bugs rather than pushing something live, cough Windows, and then having the public be a beta. So by actually having it being an opt-in thing, it's people who know what they're getting into and they can find those bugs.
Oh, that's cool.
And two, it can get people excited about things like this. Like you mentioned, the H.264 and HEVC hardware encoding. Even before it's live to the public, it's still in beta. And like we could publish articles on it, which is awesome. Like that was one of our like most popular articles in a while. And it was just, hey, it's beta. We're gonna test a couple of things to see how it runs, and then once it's in full release, we'll do it again and do it more in depth. But then we can start to see that like, hey, man, we're seeing up to like a 3 times increase in like export performance. That's amazing.
It was shocking. It was really shocking to see the results. Like, I mean, thinking about it, like you know that like Resolve has always had a really good leverage for GPU accelerated stuff, and so on the one hand it was somewhat expected, but to see such a huge improvement was, to me at least, that was mind blowing. That's so like, what, 2 to 5 times in some cases, like amazing.
Yeah, I think the most we saw was 5 times, and sometimes it's nothing. It just depends on where your bottleneck is. If your bottleneck is on the actual encoding to H.264, then it's going to be amazing. If your bottleneck is in like some effects that you have applied, then no, it's not going to do as much. It just all depends. But yeah, it's really cool. Like I've been using it. We've been putting out little short videos as like a summary in our articles. And oh my goodness, I went from like, oh yeah, it takes like 2 or 3 minutes to like, hey, now it takes like 30 seconds to export. And it's amazing because I'm not a professional video editor. So I export once and then I watch it and I'm like, oops, I missed something. And then so I have to do it again. And then it's not unusual for me to have to export 2 or 3 times. And like that just makes it so much better for me.
Yeah, it saves a lot of time. We do have one question from Twitch, Renegade Devi. or no, Renegade VI. He says, can you tell Adobe to stop using CEF Chromium for dialog windows? It's so slow to create new documents because the dialog is web.
Oh man, there's so much stuff with their like whole how they're using, like you're saying, CEF and Chromium. I have a love-hate with it because on the one hand, it's really great when you're actually in it and working. So like we do a lot of API or development of plugins for our benchmarks. They're all API driven through Premiere or After Effects and whatever. And it's really nice just that it's JavaScript based, because then like you can find everything. But yeah, I get you on like how it's kind of slow. I also don't like it oftentimes because it's hard for us to automate things. So like our production department, we go, and our labs department, we do like automated benchmark runs where it's totally, we don't touch the system at all.
Right.
But oftentimes we have to like see, like if a dialog box comes up, we have to like read it and know what to do. And you can't do that with Chromium. Like it's a security thing. So,
oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, like you cannot read those kind of things. It's, I mean, again, it's good for security, bad for automation, which, I mean, really all automation is hijacking your system. So it's good, but it's,
right.
it's a little annoying for us. Huh. So yeah, good luck getting Adobe to change from Chromium, though. I doubt. I mean, even is it Edge? Microsoft Edge just switched to Chromium.
Yeah, it is.
And it broke a lot of stuff I was using it for.
Oh, dang. That's too bad. Huh.
That happens. That's whenever new things come out. It always breaks something, makes other things better, and you just gotta work with it.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, what's new with you, Matt? What do you like? I know we just kind of were talking about the H.264 stuff, but like, what else? What else is going on? What else is what's
like in the industry?
Hot on the spot? Yeah, what's hot on the spot? What are you excited about today?
Today. Oh man. Oh well. Again, what we just talked about was a big deal. We did just do a big old CPU launch recently, so I mean we can fill in some stuff until we get any like other questions. But yeah, the Intel 10th gen stuff. It's like a bit underwhelming, I think, because Intel has been on the same like manufacturing process for like 4 generations or something like that. Yeah. So it is faster, but it's not like anything crazy. Like let me see here. I should be able to share my screen of this. I've never done this before. There, so you should be able to see my screen now.
There you go.
But so like this is our Premiere Pro, just our benchmark results. And so this is just looking at the new 10th gen and then versus AMD Ryzen. And it's like, I mean, it's good. I mean, the fact that like up here, the 10900K 10 core, it's about the same price as the 3900X from AMD with 12 cores. And yet the scores are almost identical for us. Like that's great. But then as you go down, like the 10700K, I think that's similar in price to the 3800X or the 37. And like it's faster, so like that's great. So there are like there are still some advantages to going with Intel over AMD in terms of pure performance, like After Effects too. So this is basically the same thing. And in After Effects, man, it's not a big difference though. Like After Effects is very single threaded.
Yeah,
so
it looks like there's hardly difference.
Well, kind of the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like you use whatever. And in our case, that often means that we go with Intel because Thunderbolt tends to be more reliable on Intel platforms. AMD is improving, but I mean Intel owns Thunderbolt, so it kind of makes sense that it works a little bit better on Intel platforms. Huh. So, but yeah, so like that 10th gen launch, I don't think we've even added it to our website yet. We're still dealing with supply concerns. There's always supply concerns on new products. And what motherboards we're going to carry, what backup motherboards when those don't have good supply.
Right.
But yeah, I think what we're going to probably end up doing is like After Effects, Photoshop will definitely have the 10th gen offerings. Premiere Pro, I'm not sure. The funny thing with Premiere Pro, so we were just talking about the H.264 encoding, the hardware encoding with the GPU, and that's awesome. But the part that's still lacking is the decoding, so the actual processing of H.264. Like if you're in the timeline and you hit play, because H.264 sucks for editing with.
Okay.
And yet everyone does because that's what cameras shoot in.
Sure.
And it's small and compact. And the decoding in Premiere Pro and After Effects still uses Intel QuickSync. So it's only on Intel CPUs that have graphics basically integrated.
Okay.
And so Intel still has a lead on decoding or like playing of H264, H265 media, which is I think partly why on that chart I showed with Premiere Pro that Intel has a small lead. It's just because of that.
Okay.
So when or if, I'm sure it's going to be a when, not an if, Adobe adds hardware accelerated decoding from the GPU, then I don't know if Intel's going to have a lead anymore. Because now the fact that Intel has QuickSync, like who cares? Because using the GPU is going to be way faster than QuickSync always. So at that point, Intel doesn't have that small advantage.
Okay, if we can leverage the GPU to encode the video, why can we not do the same thing?
You can,
to
totally
decode?
can. You can. Result does that.
Okay, yeah. So like, it's more of a choice that software development choice.
Yeah, and I'm not sure why Adobe took so long, because hardware like GPU encoding and decoding is not new. Like there were lots of people in the Adobe ecosystem that what they did is they would export to ProRes or DNX before ProRes was supported, and then they would use like Handbrake or FFmpeg or whatever it is to re-encode that to H264 because that was faster than encoding directly to H264. That shouldn't be a problem anymore. But yeah, I don't know when they'll do that. My guess, this is total guess based on nothing I know from Adobe, is that they will keep they'll keep working on the hardware encoding for maybe as much as 6 months to a year, and then they'll get into the hardware decoding after that. I think they want to kind of take baby steps because they've been using just QuickSync for so long that it's a major shift, and they've already had, I mean, any new feature that's as significant as this is going to have bugs, but they've already pushed an update that had some bug fixes for that. And I've heard of people who've had some bugs where it not showing up. Like it's some of it's dumb stuff. If you have your export settings set to custom, and then like H264 hardware encoding doesn't show up. But if it's set to H264 first, then you modify it, then it shows up. So it's little things like that.
Okay.
I mean, in an application that's as complex as Premiere Pro, like, yeah, there's gonna be those little things.
Yeah.
But we'll see how those go through. But that's probably one of the things I'm looking forward to, because once they do that, that should be awesome. Like we'll finally, maybe all these people that work with drone footage that all shoots in like 4K H265 that you can't edit, you have to do transcodes or proxies.
Right.
Hopefully that means like we'll be able to, and then they can just skip that step.
That seems such a strange disconnect from the recording side and the editing side. It's if everybody, it just seems, I don't know where the the miscommunication or I guess whatever it's how we got here, but it's like if everybody is shooting in whatever X, why wouldn't the software or the tools that you need to edit that footage follow along with that? It's like if we're to go back into the physical film, it's like, well, if I'm going to use this plastic film, why is my scissors so dull? You know, it's oh man, this is really a year or two ago I put a whole article out on why is H264 hard to process, and there's a bunch of articles out there. I think Frame.io has a really good one. There's a couple of others, and I think it's just the goals are different when you're on your cell phone, or you're recording game footage even through OBS. It's going to do it in H264 or H265 because the file sizes can be really small. If you were to record in ProRes, it's going to fill your hard drive immediately, whether it's your computer or your camera. You need large storage for that. And people that are professional, I won't say professional, filmmakers, shooting Hollywood films or whatever, they do that because storage for them is cheap versus the processing and all that.
But yeah, like on your cell phone or like GoPros or whatever, or drones, especially where weight's a concern.
Right.
Yeah, you need small. You need it to be nice and compact, and that's actually not too hard to record to because, oh man, we're getting a little nerdy here. But how H.264 and H.265 work? It's basically you have your first frame, and it records everything, and that's called I think it's keyframe or iframe, I think.
Okay.
And then your second frame is just what's changed since that frame. So you only are recording a part of the screen. If the only thing, like in my case, my background wouldn't ever be changing. It's just me that's changing, and even like down here might not change at all. So and it does that for each frame. So that's why like it's not that hard to record, and it's actually not that hard to play back. Like your phone can play back 4K H.264 or H.265 because it's just having to like. Okay, start with the first frame, and then it just processes what's the differences and shows those differences. The hard thing with editing is you can't just rely on what the differences are. Each frame has to be fully decoded into like, I mean, think of it kind of like an image, so that you can apply any effects. Because you can't just like I'm going to do color correction on only what's changed, because that's not going to really work. So if you have like, I'm making up some numbers here, like 50 frames worth of where you have a starting frame and then just the changes. When you hit that 50th frame and you wanted to like show that in Premiere Pro, it actually has to go all the way back to frame 1 and do all of it to catch up to that frame you're on. So that's why it's really hard to process for editing, but it's not too bad for playback in like phone or YouTube or whatever. So it's a tough one, and the hardware accelerated in decoding and encoding, it's basically just taking the it's just very specialized hardware or specialized code to make it so that like I don't know how it works on the internals, but it just makes it easier to do all of that kind of processing.
Okay, I see. All right, so we do have a question from YouTube, Redith Graham. He says, my question right now would be, what is the best CPU to go with? And I mean best, not just okay, for just editing in the Adobe suite, not exporting. He says, I've been building my editor's computers with X299 9900X up until recently, but now we have a Threadripper export server, so they just need to do the editing on their computers. Mm-hmm. Is that something we still need HEDT for?
Let me see here. So a lot of that, here, I'll go ahead and show my screen again.
Data.
Yeah, I love data. So, that's not the one I want. I went down here. So generally for editing, you're caring about live playback. You even mentioned you don't care about exporting. So this is our giant chart that we did recently. So if you go to in fact, let me show this. So if you go to our website and you go to our publications and articles, you can filter along the left here for, in this case, we want Premiere Pro, processors, and then generally the top article is going to be the most recent. So that's what I'm looking at here. And so in terms of live playback, you can go, I mean, you can kind of see here, it's a range, 9900K you were using 9900X. Right. Which probably is going to be around the 10900X, honestly. It's not that much different. So that's somewhere around this score that we get around 64. And so you can go up to, Threadripper is at the top. The new 10th gen stuff is down here. It just depends on how much. But just as a example, I always got to use calculators here. So to go from the top down to the bottom, that's 80.4 divided by, let's see, you're probably somewhere around, I'm going to call it 64. So you could get up to 25% better playback performance kind of stuff by going up all the way up to like a Threadripper. Okay. The thing with Threadripper is you don't want to go to the very tip top. Like you can see here, the 64 core, the most expensive one, is actually slower than the other two. I think for most people, you just use the 3960X, the 24 core, because once you have too many cores, a lot of applications actually get worse. You run into problems with what's called memory thrashing. It's just you have so many different cores trying to exchange data that you run into problems with memory speed and bus speed. So unless the application is actually really, really good at using those cores, it's often worse to have them once you get up to these extreme cases. So in general, I think the CPUs that I would recommend, depending on your budget, is either going to be the 10900K down here, Intel. Then I would probably jump up to the Ryzen 3950X or the 10980XE Intel if you want to use Intel for like Thunderbolt. It's like $200 more expensive than the 3950X, but you get Thunderbolt support.
Yeah.
Well, reliable Thunderbolt support, I should say.
Yeah.
Assuming you get a motherboard that has good Thunderbolt support too. Thunderbolt's a kind of it's not the easiest thing. On PC, you've got to make sure you've got a motherboard that supports it well, and a platform that supports it well, and devices that work. That's kind of like the mid-range, and then at the top end, if you're looking for the best performance, I'd probably do like the 3960X Threadripper, and definitely go with the Threadripper 3s, the third gen. The Threadripper second gens were not great for things like late playback. They were okay for things like exporting, but their single core performance was not great. AMD just went all in on cores on that generation. The third generation, it's just great for everything. So hopefully that answers your question there.
Yeah, I think that did, because he did go on to say
10G and Thunderbolt 3 are both required. Yeah, I would go with probably the 10, probably either the new 10900K, or I jump up to the 10980XE, the X299 one, because, well, you already have X299, so you should be able to go. You should be able to just go straight up to just upgrading the CPU. But the hard thing is that the other HEDT offerings from Intel, like 10900X, 10920X, 10940X, most of those are like on par with the 10900K. Oh man, not confusing names at all.
Gotta love these model numbers.
So there's usually very little reason to do one of those CPUs. But in your case, since you're doing like upgrade rather than like a whole new platform, it might make sense.
Let's see. Do you guys think Thunderbolt support is going to become better now when it's part of the USB 4 standard?
Oh, I don't know. Thunderbolt. So my thoughts on Thunderbolt is that the reason why it's hard is not just because like it's like USB 4 or whatever. The problem with Thunderbolt is it has to support USB and like straight to the PCIe bus and display. And so it's just a very complicated like standard. So you have to, like, we had so many problems with Thunderbolt 2. Actually, Thunderbolt 2 was the worst.
I remember
and it came down to like the motherboard BIOS had to have the right version, and the firmware for the Thunderbolt thing, and the firmware on the device, and the drivers had to be right, and the Windows Update version had to be right. And so you had all of these things that had to match or be right, and it was a pain to get all of those right. Thunderbolt 3 so far has been way better. We rely on Gigabyte a lot for our motherboards because their Thunderbolt has been, well, partially because their Thunderbolt support has been better than the others. But yeah, it's still not as good as like Apple. Well, one, they've been using Thunderbolt for a long time. It was exclusive to Apple for a long time. And two, the other advantage that Apple has is they control everything. They control the hardware, they control the BIOS, they control the firmware, they control the OS. So all of it is one control. On a PC, you might have Gigabyte, who's using a Thunderbolt controller from Intel, and then you've got Microsoft doing Windows, and you just got all these different things that are mixing together. So they've really got to get, they have to gel before it'll work really well. So I don't know if Thunderbolt's going to become better because of USB 4. I think it's just getting better and better and better as it's being used by more and more people, and like everyone is starting to realize, like, okay, yes, this is an actual value add we have to spend money on to develop. It's not a gimmick, it's real.
Yeah, there definitely seems to be more of a like consumer demand, as there's been quite the, I don't want to say exodus, but there has been a very big shift kind of back from Apple in that space, and people still have all these extra devices, these either displays or external drives or what have you, and they need that stuff to work as they as their like workstation hardware has to improve, and that usually means moving over to PC.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I think it's kind of the demand is there, and so now they're having to catch up.
Yeah, and sometimes I think people don't realize that they don't need Thunderbolt. Like maybe they have a Thunderbolt 3 drive, but it's just like an SSD. And like, no, you can just plug that into a USB 3 or 3.1 Gen 2 X2 by 2. What the stupid
C,
naming
the
of
C,
USB
right?
now?
USB-C.
Yeah, but you like USB is more than fast enough for that. Like you don't actually need direct Thunderbolt. And like you're not going to notice the difference. And USB is way more reliable than Thunderbolt.
And I can attest to that. I was actually I have a 4 terabyte external drive that I plug into this laptop USB-C. I didn't realize I had been doing quite a lot of my video editing on that. It's a platter drive, 7200 RPM platter drive over USB-C, and I was getting by. I mean, I'm not doing anything crazy, but I hadn't noticed any weird issues until I started using. You and I we were fiddling around with some of the proxy stuff, and I found out that I think was why I was having troubles. It took a long time and some funny business there, but yeah, I was editing straight off of a mechanical drive over USB-C, and it seemed to be just fine.
Yeah, oftentimes one of the biggest dangers of using an external drive for editing is that like if you're in Premiere Pro or After Effects or whatever, and the drive drops for a split second, which is not uncommon when it's an external, like maybe you bump it or whatever. It just decides it's going to drop for a second. If you're in Premiere Pro, it'll be just like, hey, all your media's offline. And you're like, you got to relink it all.
Oops.
And like, that's just a pain. That's why oftentimes, like when people are having issues and they're editing off externals, we just tell them like, no, I know it's a pain, but you've got to copy it internally. And, because if it works, it'll work fine. If you start having problems, it's probably like the port on your device, on your drive is starting to like get a little wonky or something. And so like, you can't do that. You either got to replace the drive or, I mean, it's always possible it's the port on your computer. Like you never know. So it's tough. And again, if it works, it works. But I think we've been noticing a lot of people recently are starting to move from external drives to network attached storage. It's a lot higher cost to get into it initially to go to network attached storage, but oh man, it's so much more reliable. Especially a lot of our customers, because we have a lot of people who have mixed Mac and PC workflows, and man, trying to use external drives with that is a huge pain. You've got to use like third-party utilities so that PCs can read the Mac formatted drives, or the Mac can can write to the PC formatted drives. And those third-party applications, like some of them are great. Like Paragon is one of the ones we recommend a lot. And like it's great if you're just doing like a file copy, but if you're actually trying to work off of it, like I was saying, like the drives dropping, that happens even more often when you're going through an extra layer like that.
Oh, geez.
So just moving to network attached storage, like it's OS independent. You just stick it in the corner somewhere. It's just on your network. Everyone has access. But again, it is a higher investment because you probably want like 10G. Networking and all that kind of jazz. You don't want to work off of Wi-Fi.
I imagine too that it'd be helpful for like production teams. When you have
absolutely.
Because I know in previous episodes of the podcast, like we've talked with some people who are involved with like cloud-based editing platforms and things like that, where you have 5, 6, 10 people all working on the same project all at the same time, and that is still basically just kind of a little bit more complicated network attached storage solution.
Yeah, cloud stuff.
It seems.
Man,
it
cloud
feels
is its own thing. I think the biggest problem with the cloud editing is the performance isn't that great because they're trying to run all this stuff off of server hardware that is not good for like Premiere Pro or After Effects. And 2, you have to have all your data there. Like you're not going to stream your data from your local computer to this cloud thing. Like no, you have to actually copy all your data up into the cloud, and that can take a long time depending on your internet speeds and all that jazz. So
okay, so we actually have a few questions coming in from YouTube. Danny Atkinson asks, when are you going to, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, when are you going to do the Resolve Mac Pro 2019 versus PC article?
Okay. I don't know. What's holding that up is actually I need to revamp our Resolve testing, our Resolve benchmark. It's been on my to-do list forever, but we've gotten really absorbed into our Adobe benchmark suite, and getting like our commercial version, paid version, and all that kind of stuff, and our benchmark browser so people can upload the results. Working on the Resolve one is next. But I don't know when it's going to be, because I've got to completely revamp it. There's so many changes that have happened to Resolve that I really need to include in our testing. Yeah, so if I had to give a guess, a couple of months. The other hard part with that is, so the Mac Pro that we used for our Adobe testing was actually loaned to us by Linus Tech Tips, and we sent that back a while ago. Right. I did grab some results from it before we sent it back, but at this point those results are old and on old versions and everything, so I don't know if those would be useful. So what we might have to do is, once I get that benchmark revamped, I might try to talk Linus into running some benchmarks for us on their Mac Pro, or just trying to crowdsource it. Because the nice thing with I'll share my screen again. This is cool to be able to do. The nice thing with our benchmarks now is we have this public result browser, and there are some. I think we're up to something like 3,500 results.
That's amazing.
So hopefully, what we can do is we can get just people to run it. So, like we've already there's some results here for Premiere Pro that's an old Mac Pro. Oh, that's gonna be that's terrible sport. But hopefully we can get some people with actual Mac Pros like down here. Although that's a Radeon 7. That's weird. I don't know. Some people do weird stuff, or they do Hackintoshes. But hopefully we can get a little bit of crowdsourcing, because man, those Mac Pros are so expensive that we can't really justify buying a couple. We did with we have an iMac Pro, we've got an older Mac Pro, but man, we can't drop $100,000 on a couple of different configurations. So hopefully we can get some people to run those benchmarks for us, and then we can get an article up. If I had to give a guess in timeline, hopefully by the end of the year.
It'll be the
I don't know if I can give any more. Yeah, getting these benchmarks updated is so much work. So hopefully it can be soon. Resolve is definitely still on our radar. It's a big deal for us, but yeah, we got to get that updated first.
Next question is actually from Mr. Richard Falk.
I remember you, Richard.
Hey, I remember you. Do you think Intel will be able to get 10 nanometer or 7 nanometer production in mass, or will we all be moving to Team Red in the next few years?
I'm not sure. I don't know what's NDA and what's not, so I think I have to just avoid that question entirely.
I totally understand.
Yeah, I don't know what Intel has put out publicly as far as their next couple of products. If I have to guess, just from Intel, I doubt it's been very much, so I should probably just avoid that.
No comment.
I do think though that the whole Team Red thing, AMD has been doing an amazing job.
They really have.
I will say that I think Intel is has their work cut out for them to meet AMD standards. For us, from what we've seen, Intel platform a little bit more reliable than AMD platforms at the moment, but it's getting better and better and better. And I think some of that is just a legacy of, there's a couple of different things.
When you say reliable, what do you mean?
Like driver issues, blue screens, that kind of stuff. For us, I think the last stat we had was that Intel platforms have about half the support tickets, or 50. I forget. It's significantly lower support tickets than our AMD Ryzen platforms. So, and I think some of that's Intel, and NVIDIA too, because I'm in part of its GPU side. They're much bigger companies. They have a lot more money. They can just dump into things like driver support and things like that. But AMD is getting bigger. They're poaching a lot of people from Intel and NVIDIA. So I think that's improving drastically. Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is that I think over the next 2 or 3 years, I bet that we're not going to actually see a winner between Intel and AMD. I think we're going to see that they're very on par. Because Intel has so much money to put behind R&D, but AMD is in a position of strength right now. So I think it's just going to be hey, you want to go with Intel, go for it. If you want to go with AMD, go for it. It just depends, somewhat like on your workload. If you're doing like ray tracing rendering that uses a ton of cores, then you probably go with AMD. I bet Intel's still going to have a slight lead in single core performance. So like After Effects, maybe Intel has a slight lead. But I bet we're going to be talking like, 5%. Can you notice the difference between playing back a timeline at 60 FPS or 59 and a half? No.
Yeah.
So it's just like, you can go whichever way. So that's what I hope. Competition is awesome for everyone because this is going to drive prices down. I mean, Intel cut the cost of their X series processors in half.
Yeah.
Like, that's awesome. That's so good.
It's been cool to see that kind of stuff happening. Let's see here. I don't think you can answer these questions, but I'll ask anyway. I think this is internally NDA. When are we getting Puget cases? Can't buy from Case Labs anymore.
Oh man, I don't know. I know we're working on our own cases. I have no idea what the timeline is. It seems like it's been soon for a while.
Yeah.
But man, case development. This is not the first time we've tried to do our own cases.
Yeah.
I think we were working with. Who was it? I think the last time it was for a rack mount, and it was with like iStar or something like that. And it was a nightmare. I think this time is better because we're mostly staying in the U.S. or we're working with like a company that does better of the like translating to Taiwan or China or whatever.
Sure.
But the problem we had last time was like we would get a revision and then we would like say, okay, we need to change these two things. And the next revision would come in and have those two things changed. But hey, now these other 4 things just got changed for no reason. Like, wait, why did you change that? It's because like every single time, it's like they never saved the old plan, so they just started from scratch every time.
Oh,
it was just
crazy.
like it was such a disaster.
Man, you almost want to do it ourselves at a point,
So this round of trying to get our own cases is going way better. Like I've seen the prototypes; they're great. They're not going to be flawless from the start, but
right.
It's something we have to do because it seems like more and more like Fractal is a great company. Like we've done work with Fractal for a long time, but they are making cases for like DIYers and enthusiasts who want toolless. Like they want everything toolless. Like I don't want to use a screwdriver, but that doesn't work for us because like, hey, we mount a hard drive toolless. Hey, now it's just a wrecking ball that's inside the computer when it gets shipped by UPS rolling it off the back of their truck.
Those floating cages, I cringed when they first were showing those in the R6. I was like, you're gonna hold onto a heavy, thick platter drive on one short side and one long side, and it's really just like one thumb screw. And
it'd be fine if you're just like if it's just in your office in your computer and it never moves. But shipping, Now I don't know if we're going to be making our cases available to like just buy. Probably not.
I wouldn't think so.
No, we've done like part sales in the past, and it was never what's the right way to say it? I don't want to say worth our time, but kind of, because anytime you have to do things like part sales, like you're having to spend a time investment, and we've just found that we would rather spend that time investment in what we actually really want to do.
Yeah.
Like full built workstations.
It just becomes a bad experience for everybody involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and also too, like our cases, they might not always come with all the screws. We might get them like without screws, and then we just like have bins of screws that our builders, grab and and use, so that they don't have to like open up little Ziploc bags of screws with every case. They just have, here's a bunch of M3 screws, here's a bunch of 632 screws, and they just grab from their own bins. So we might not even have them in a form that would work for selling as parts.
Yeah. So I know the answer to this one generally, but I know you'll have a little bit of extra input on this. Can you put 2 Titan RTX in a chassis without overheating?
I think you can do 2, as long as they've got a space in between them, and you've got like, I would recommend like a side fan blowing fresh air in, and then you've got to have good exhaust. The problem with the Titan RTX is they are like open air cooling only.
Yeah,
so
in fact, that dual fan reference design, and that the problem with that is that it all vents out the long edge of the card, and so it isn't actually escaping very well. And so I remember we did it's an older article now, but our initial look at the RTX cards basically say that. Yeah, you can't.
I'm trying to see if I can find that article.
You'll want the one space, but even then, it's a little sketchy.
Yeah, I can't find it.
I think William wrote that one.
Yeah, here we go. Here, let me share this.
Sure.
Again, because I can share screens. So this is an older article. So it's basically, this is kind of the summary. Oh, wow, that's a really wide article. This is a really whole article system. So the blower style ones, they're really nice because they draw fresh air right into the fan, and then they exhaust it out the back. So all your hot air is out of the system. The problem with these style, which the RTX Titan only comes in this, there's no third-party version that like has a blower style. So it pulls air into the fans, and then it exhausts it into the system. So it's like, there's nowhere for that hot air to go. So unless you have really good exhaust, it just builds up. And it's even worse if you stack the cards on top of each other, because then you're just like, the hot air from the bottom card is just kind of wafting up to the next card, which then tries to use that to cool. So I think we allow 2 Titan RTXs in systems as long as they have really good cooling, like more cooling than you would normally need. For dual GPUs, and they can have at least one space in between them. So no micro ATX cases.
Yep.
That'd be a disaster.
So I'll answer this question. We're asked by Shadow Dragon 7015 on Twitch. Don't you still sell the Puget GPU brackets? And we do not. When Fractal changed over to the R6, we had to redesign our graphics card bracing, which we no longer do the acrylic bracing for. Not that L-shaped little arm with a thumb on it. Since we're not making those internally anymore, we aren't selling them. And it kind of comes back to that kind of explanation of not selling the PC case. It's not something that we are really super jazzed to do, and so
yeah, it's all you're investing time and effort into something, and what can we get out of that versus if we invest that same amount of time and effort into, I don't know, doing testing or doing something that's gonna make life better for our I don't want to say bigger customers, but like our normal customers, our target customers, I should say. The people that we really want to help. If we can spend time and effort on that, great. It's one of the reasons why I like the aquarium that we sold years ago, when it got trademarked or patented by someone else, and then they wanted us to pay them. Every time we sold, we just said, no, we're just not going to do it anymore. That's okay. Yeah. We've been kind of thinking about how this is a pain to do constantly anyway, so we're just going to stop, because we never really made much money off of those aquarium things. And same with the GPU brackets. Mostly we did that because there was a need, even in the DIY industry, or the people building on computers, where people were having GPUs sagging all over the place. And now there's other products out there that do the exact same thing at cheaper, because they're mass manufacturing them, versus us using our laser cutter in the back to do these one by one. So there's other products already out there, and it even cases are already starting to integrate that kind of stuff. So it's a problem that's kind of been solved. So we're just kind of backing away. Now we're focusing on things like public benchmarks for the Adobe suite and other things, because that's an area where there is a need. People do need to know how much faster is a new computer going to be. And by having benchmarks, they can run it on their own and be like, okay, I know exactly how much faster it's going to be, versus they think that it's going to be faster. They buy a new computer and they're like, it's only 10% faster. That's not uncommon for us to run into. So this is a great way just to get that problem solved as well.
So somebody had made a comment while we were talking about the Titan RTX. They said that the Quadro RTX 6000 is better.
Yeah, it's also way more expensive. And it's actually not as fast. The RTX 6000 is equivalent to, I want to say it's probably a RTX 2080 Super. It's probably somewhere around there. It has more VRAM, but in terms of just performance, the main reason you go with Quadro is you go for it's more reliable. The driver support is better, and that is not a small consideration. I think if you are, I don't care, a video editor working for NBC, and you're doing news stuff, and you are that stuff is very time, it needs to be done then. And if your computer has a problem, Premiere Pro crashes, your system blue screens, anything happens, that's a disaster. And at that point, like, you don't care how much money it is. Like, NVIDIA could increase the cost of their Quadros by twice as much. I mean, they're not going to, because at that point it might be a little string. But like, they could increase the cost, and like, it doesn't matter, because the whole point is reliable. And spending a couple extra $1,000, who cares? Like, that's nothing. The Titans are just a weird part, like where like it's a really high-end consumer, but it's not quite in their workstation line. Yeah, it's just it's an odd part. But yeah, the things with Quadro is the reliability, I think, is number one. I don't think it has more VRAM than the Titan RTX, and it has the blower style cards, or the blower style fan, so you can actually do multiple cards in one go. I saw that you said the same CUDA counts, but I think it's lower. Each core speed is lower, right? So, or like the boost clocks are lower. I don't know. All I know is that when we've actually done testing, it ends up in applications like Premiere Pro or After Effects or Photoshop. It ends up being somewhere around the 2080 Super to 2080 Ti.
Interesting.
But again, totally different use cases. Titan RTX and the GeForce cards, it's all about performance first. Quadro, it's about reliability first.
Right. So Danny Atkinson from YouTube is asking, can you use Cubics expansion with Threadrippers?
Is that those GPU things?
That is a new term
Google
for
this.
me. So hold.
Yeah, PCIe expansion. You should be able. Well, you'd have to check with the board. So these Cubics expansions, sure, just because I can do this, I'll go ahead and do this. So you put in it's basically you put in a PCIe card, but all that PCIe card is a pass through, and then it goes to these expansion boxes. So you can take like the 16 lanes that are on that slot, and then you can divide it up between X4, 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 or X8 and X8, or X1s, or whatever, because there's a lot of devices. Like in this case, it looks like they've got an SDI out, and I don't know, some like display stuff, maybe a Quadro or something in there. And like, that's great, because if you have a lot of cards already in your kit system, but you want to have like a Blackmagic Decklink card or a couple of other things, you can basically split up that slot. The problem is the motherboard has to support, is it lane duplexing? I think something like that, where like it can actually be split up. Because some other boards, you try to do that, it just won't work. So I think the biggest thing is that the motherboard has to support it. That's not something we've ever dealt with, so I can't tell you whether, like, from a chipset level, if it's supported, or if it'd be like a motherboard level. I'm not sure, but I do know that is the thing that you have to check, is if it supports. I think it's duplexing. I think duplexing is the term.
That's interesting. So
it's really cool.
Yeah, that's
it's kind of like when
it's
GPU,
like a bifurcation kind of thing.
Yeah. Or bifurcation. Maybe that's the word. Maybe it's not duplexing. Maybe it's
I've seen that in like ITX, in certain applications of ITX chassis, where they'll come with a it's like a ribbon that plugs into the one 16x slot, but it'll give you two 8x slots, essentially. So yeah, Jay Chen in YouTube is saying PCIe bifurcation. So
that's what it is. Duplexing is a network thing, I think. I don't know. Sure. But yeah, it was also really interesting when GPU mining, like Bitcoin mining, was really big. Mm-hmm. Like, people would have a single board, and then there were cards basically just like that, where you'd plug in one thing and it would split it out using actually USB cables, because USB apparently had enough pins to handle X1, PCIe X1. So that would split out to a whole bunch of X1 slots that, like, you would just put video cards into each one, because when you're doing mining, I guess you don't need a lot of transfer over the PCIe bus, I guess. And so it was fine to do, or whatever. It must have been worth it. But you ran into there were some really weird boards. There were boards made for mining where it didn't have PCIe slots at all. It just had what looked like USB,
like 28 USB, the wide, your classic.
And it wasn't USB, it was PCIe, but it was just made to go to, like, it's basically a riser, because you could do 32 cards on, like, on some of these platforms, and then, but you can't fit 32 cards on a motherboard. Right. So it just lets you, like, spider it out to, like, it was insane. Like,
some of that stuff was
weird.
Pretty cool. I mean, I love the ingenuity of people, though. Like, they saw a need and they stepped up and met it really fast. Like it was within months. So that's pretty cool. We have the boss is here.
Oh no, John's here. John's on YouTube.
That's pretty cool. Let's see. Asus seems to be trying to fix the issue without brackets. I believe that's the GPU sagging.
Yeah, there's been so much ones. There's so many different people. Like EVGA, I think has had some cards that are supposed to like support it. The problem is that like on any of these brackets, you've got a GPU and you're supporting it. Well, I'll go this way. You're supporting it here where you're screwing it in, and then you're supporting it on the slot. That's it. So between 2 points, anything that's outside of these 2 points is gonna be pulling down.
Right.
And that's oftentimes where all the heat sinks are and stuff. And those are heavy. Like heat sinks on GPUs are getting beefy. Yeah. And it's good. Like beefy heat sinks mean the fans don't have to be as powerful or as loud, or it can just handle more, so it can do things like turbos and stuff. But it's just so much weight, and there's only so much you can like reinforce between those 2 points, especially the PCIe slot, because PCIe slots are not strong. Like I know there's boards that have like reinforced PCIe slots. That doesn't do it. It helps, but it's not a solution. So I'm just glad that a lot of cases, because I think you have to solve this from a case, that they're starting to put like brackets or something you can screw on. And this is something that we've been giving a lot of feedback to like Asus and EVGA and Gigabyte with their video cards of always have mounting points on the back of your card. Like we hate it when like they have otherwise a great card, but then there's like it's just like a plastic shroud on the back with no like screw mounting points. Like that's terrible, because then we can't make bracing at all. You have to like do some weird like use like you were mentioning earlier, our GPU braces or whatever. But the problem with a lot of those is it's fine if your computer like is sitting at your office, but when it's being shipped, it's not always this side up. Like
that's it.
It's a whatever different ways. So really the only way is like screws hard mounted where it's not gonna move no matter what orientation it is.
I have been seeing a lot more of like the metal backing that runs along the whole length of the PCB.
Yeah, I'm sure that helps a little bit. I think most of that is for thermal dissipation.
Oh, okay.
But I'm sure it helps. But the problem is also like the more stuff you add, the more weight you're adding too.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of those things that until there is some like total revamp of how we do expansion cards, it's just going to be a problem. It's the same thing. We have the same issue with CPU heat sinks. Like CPU heat sinks are so big and beefy. Like we love big and beefy heat sinks. We actually prefer those over liquid cooling, even though like liquid cooling technically like you can get the same surface area, and it's actually hard mounted to the case. But for us, we prefer air cooling because liquid cooling has like a pump that can fail and has the pump noise. You can get leaks. It's just more points of failure. Mm-hmm. And so we prefer those big heat sinks. But again, you're shipping stuff, you're dropping the cases constantly. Those things can just like,
it just
so we have to mount support.
It just means that we need to go back to the desktop layout where everything's just horizontal,
flat.
Yeah, and just flat, and we ship everything with cards and CPU. It's all just pointing in that upward. Again,
that doesn't help UPS though when they decide, no, this way's up, or I'm gonna roll it off the back. So there's no matter what, I think it's just gonna be a problem until we hit some, if quantum computing somehow ends up actually being good for the stuff we do every day, and it's not actually only good for some things like we think it's gonna be. Like, unless there's that kind of a thing where heat is no longer an issue, we're gonna not have much. Oh man, it's already 1:55.
Yep. Let's see. I think we're caught up from chat questions. Anything else you'd like to mention as we approach our hour?
If you're interested in benchmarks and stuff, definitely check out our public benchmarks. You can just go to pugetsystems.com/benchmarks. I think we'll link you to all of them.
Yep.
It's not in our nav yet because all of our benchmarks are still in beta. But if I'm sure a lot of people who tune into these, a lot of people who tune into these webcasts are probably more like hardware enthusiasts or people who are really interested in hardware. So definitely give those a check out.
And
it's always fun to run benchmarks and upload benchmark results.
And seriously do it. The more data that we get, the better that we can compare and answer a lot more of these sort of questions. Like, hey, I'm still on a 4790K. Like, should I make the jump to 9900K? You know, that kind of those sort of questions. It helps to be able to dig through all that data and say, oh, well, yeah, this is the score that guy got with a similar build, and this is what we got in our latest article.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we even had that today. Someone was talking about upgrading from a 6850X, I think. Mm-hmm. And that one, like, we don't have a result for. But the other cool thing we can say is, like, well, here, just run the benchmark. Yeah. And then they can run it, and we know exactly how much faster their old system is. But I'm really excited about our public benchmarks and, like, the results uploads, because at a certain point, like, whenever we publish an article, we have to spend days doing a whole bunch of automated testing. Like, we have to test each one of those things we're doing. And if we can get to the point where we can be like, hey, we're curious how like this new Intel Tension compares to Apple's offerings, we could just like go into our results and grab the average from like a bunch of uploads. Because I mean, user submitted results can always be funky. You don't know if someone's overclocking or underclocking or whatever, but you can grab an average. And you know, at that point, then we can, all of these platforms that we can't invest in buying, you know, whether it's low-end hardware that we don't normally deal with, or it's Apple stuff, or it's, I don't know, whatever. We can just pull from a public database and pull an average. Then we can start like doing so much more of like, hey, you have a system from 5 years ago? Okay, that was this platform. How much faster will it be today? Okay, how about 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 10 years ago?
Right.
I'm excited about it. It's gonna be really
It'll be cool. I think lately for me the best thing is seeing there was somebody on Twitter who had posted their score of 56.
Yeah, on a benchmark where most systems get like 700.
Yeah, I thought
there's some abnormally, insanely low. Some of the new like
I think it was like a laptop 2500 or something.
Some of the new the really low power mobile stuff. Some of that stuff is insanely low. I have no idea how it finished the benchmarks.
I think that's just great. We should run a contest of like who can get the lowest score
without having Premiere crashed or After Effects crashed.
You know,
at that point you're well below the like.
That's not even like
recommended
spec. Yeah,
it's below that. Like it's a testament to Adobe that it runs.
I love it. Oh man, that's the kind of stuff is just. But that just shows one, by the way. Good job on your benchmark programming, that it can do that, that it's able to even begin on such a wide variety of hardware, but also like a testament to the Adobe guys as well, of being able to run on such a broad spectrum of hardware.
Yeah, and I think Adobe gets a lot of flack for like support or not support, like stability, but I've got to say that, man, we don't see nearly as many problems as it sounds like a lot of people do. And I think it comes down to a lot of things like it kind of comes down to our philosophy is like no overclocking. We run RAM at like the JEDEC specs. We stay within the RAM speeds that the CPU supports. And I think a lot in like the DIY community, people totally disregard that because it's like, oh yeah, well, of course I'll use 3600 RAM and like it'll work okay. And like it'll pass MIM test, but you know, it might make Premiere crash more often. And, you know, we've definitely seen that. And so I think that's part of it is, Adobe gets some flack because people are using systems that are overclocked and, you know, all that kind of jazz. It's just tough. Yeah, they're trying to, like John just said in the chat, like they're trying to do professional work on gaming hardware. Yeah. And that's true. Like gaming hardware is oftentimes great. Like the stability of gaming hardware can be awesome, but there's also a lot of auto overclocking and running things beyond like the Intel or AMD spec, which was a huge problem actually with the Intel 10th gen because the power limits were just like, it's become a wild west. Like all the motherboard manufacturers are just like, we're going to set this to 300 watts. Like, whoa. that's a little.
That's a lot.
Oh, I made up a number.
Like, I don't know. I'm like, that's going to be hot. 300 watts. I'm thinking the highest TDP CPU I can think of is like 195.
TDP is a meaningless number though too, because TDP is the power draw at stock speeds, which nothing ever runs stock speeds. There's speed step, there's turbo. Yeah. Okay. So it's a meaningless. I remember there were some S processors from Intel where like we tested it and they're supposed to be lower wattage, and we tested like power draw and everything, and it was identical to the normal models because it's a base market. It's a marketing thing for some of those. Some of the other ones actually have meaningful, but some of them also meh.
That's what happens when your marketing guys take over everything. I'm just kidding.
Well, yeah. No, wait, we're marketing.
Hey, all right. Well, that does put us 40 seconds ago over our hour. If we'll do real quick, maybe just another minute or two. If you guys have any other questions, get them in here. Otherwise, we're gonna say thanks for hanging out and taking the time, Matt.
Yeah, of course.
Let's see. Are you really
Make sure you guys tune in next week.
That's right. Yep, I think we're going to call that okay. So thanks, Matt, for taking time out of the day to join us for the Labs Open Office Hour, and thanks to the audience as well for joining us, asking questions. That's what we're here for, to try and help get that good value, that good info out there to the public at large. We do this Wednesdays and Fridays at 1 o'clock Pacific. Wednesdays is our Workflow Wednesday, where we bring in industry experts to kind of talk about their workflow, the state of their industry, and get a little bit of tips, tricks, and advice from those people who are down there in the trenches, are more of our actual real customer base. And then Fridays is like this Labs Open Office Hour, where you can pick the brains of our Labs team, kind of get that crossover from the workflow software and the hardware, and get those questions answered for you guys. So that's Wednesdays, Fridays, 1 p.m. Pacific time. And yeah, is there anything else you'd like to say, Matt?
No, I think you covered it. I think
All
we're good.
Download the benchmark, run it. We want to see your results.
Buy computers, and all that. I guess we should say that too.
Oh yeah.
We are a workstation company.
Oh right, yeah. Buy our stuff too.
Yeah, give us money.
All right. Well, thanks again. We'll see you next time. Bye.